So life can be very, very difficult. Life can be challenging. You don't plan things appropriately, bad things can happen. You make decisions based on bad information, or you just do things without thinking. Here's some examples, just three examples here of people that made hasty decisions, didn't think through things and what happened with their lives. This Boban Yankovic, however you say that, I think he was a Russian basketball player. He made, unfortunately, a really bad decision, just kind of in the spur of the moment. There was, like it says here, he scored a basket, but the referee called an offensive foul on him, his fifth of the game, causing him to foul out. In response to what he thought was a bad call, Janovic, Yankovic, whatever, slammed his head against a padded concrete goalpost. Unfortunately, this impulsive act resulted in a permanent spinal cord injury, leaving him unable to walk for the rest of his life. Very, very sad. Because he didn't control his emotion and had a probably inappropriate outlet for it, he suffered for the rest of his life. Another guy, hey, have you ever had some friends say, hey, I dare you to eat that? Hey, there's some Tide Pods. Why don't you see how that tastes? I dare you to eat that Tide Pod. I dare you to eat this slug. Well, unfortunately, this guy took the dare, this Sam Ballard in 2010, a 19-year-old, ate a small slug on a dare. The slug carried a parasite that caused rat lungworm disease, leading to a coma and paralysis. Sam remained affected by the disease for years and tragically passed away in 2018, 8 years later. Very bad decision. I know he regretted the decision. I'm sure his friends felt terrible about daring him to do that, but nonetheless, he suffered the consequence. Final example, this Henry Ruggs III was an all-star elite athlete. He was chosen in the first round pick as a wide receiver in the NFL, a top talented individual for professional sports. He had fame, fortune, and $1 million contract. But in a moment of incredibly poor judgment, he decided to drink and drive. He crashed his new Corvette into an innocent woman and her dog, of whom tragically lost their lives. Ruggs and his girlfriend, who was in the passenger seat, were fortunate to have survived the crash. Now, Henry sits in prison. His NFL career and a lucrative contract are gone. His reckless decision not only cost someone their life, but also derailed his own, changing his future forever. This life is so precious, and each decision um, can have long-term impacts on our future. Split-second decisions that have terrible results. Every decision should be evaluated to the greatest long-term benefit. Living for the future instead of what sounds good right now, this second. Unfortunately, I've experienced some of this hasty decisions that have long-term impacts. And I wanted to give you just one final example. A few weeks ago, I was rock climbing, and here's a picture of me one of my sons on rappel. Very, very long climb. My son had an appointment that evening. He needed to be home at 5 o'clock. In a rush, because we didn't get to the climb until about 3:30. Didn't have a lot of time. In a rush, we went about trying to set things up. Rock climbing and your life and making hasty decisions are a terrible combination. Thank goodness, as soon as I got to the top of the climb to set things up, I told my son, we have to slow down and look at things carefully. As you can see on this climb here, I couldn't get it all in one frame, but very long climb. See the ropes extended out from the cliff face, so it is overhanging. But so as I was setting up the top rope and hooking into the anchors at the top, I double checked my harness. I double checked the how I connected to the anchors. And as I was getting ready to rappel, I looked down as far as I could see, and I could see the rope didn't touch the ground. It was about 10 feet still off the ground. What if I had been hasty, in a hurry, wanting to get it done quickly so he could get to his appointment? And I didn't notice, and I started rappelling. I didn't notice the end of the rope. I could have been seriously hurt, injured, even killed if I dropped 10 or 15 feet onto the ground. Thank goodness I noticed it before, before I started rappelling. So the point is, you can't rush some things. Most things in life, every decision is important. You have to be cautious and careful. You can't be hasty. On the other end of the spectrum is rushing into things. One end is being hasty. The other end of the spectrum is not making any decision or over analyzing before you make any decisions. It's like a analysis paralysis. So hasty on one side, requiring so much data that it's beyond reasonable before you make a decision you should make. So the point is, be intentional, be cautious. And talking about setting up a life plan, there's a great book by Robert Smith that talks about a life plan, and it's called Joy on Purpose. I would recommend, I've read it. It's a great book. I need to reread it probably about 10 more times to adopt those principles into my life. So the point is, with those first examples, don't roll the dice with your life. Don't be hasty in making big decisions. And how do you know the difference if a decision you're making right now is big or little? A lot of times you don't. So you have to be cautious with every decision. And that includes, as I note here, making a list of pros and cons, and then ranking what's the greatest pros or what's the greatest cons, and then making a better, well-informed decision, focusing on what's the greatest long-term benefit. I've seen people make quick, snap decisions about very important things in their lives. I've had people, being in the lending business, deciding on a house purchase without researching neighborhoods, looking at different options for houses, looking at the financing options, and then making a decision and then regretting the decision. Just because the bank approved you for a certain amount doesn't mean that is a good amount for you. The bank will look at your gross income, the amount before tax, on what you can qualify, not after. And it doesn't factor in all of the what ifs. What if my car breaks down? What if I don't have the overtime? What if I have all these other expenses? Can I really afford? You have to sit down and figure your budget before you decide on buying a house. Another big one people make quick decisions on is changing jobs. The best time to look for a new job is when you have a job. You have to weigh out all of the different factors in changing jobs, make sure it's the right decision. Starting a new relationship or getting married, huge decisions. I knew someone very closely I know, that from the time that they met until the time that they got married, it was like 8 weeks or 2 months. Much too quick. It was an emotional decision, much too quick to get married and make that kind of decision. Being cautious. In the scriptures, one of the things we're told is be cautious how you judge people. If you look at Paul, the Apostle Paul, when he was shipwrecked, the locals thought he was a murderer. He was because, you know, of this snake bite thing. And it's very interesting. You have to read the story. But when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on a fire, a viper crawled out because of the heat and fastened itself on his hand. And when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they began saying one to another, "Undoubtedly, this man is a murderer. And though he has been saved from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live." So they judged him. But when he shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no harm, they they stood watching, expecting him to swell up and then suddenly drop dead. So they had no idea who this person was. And because of the circumstances, the snake crawled out and bit him. This must be a sign from God that he's a bad person. When in fact, it was used to show them that he was a holy man, that he suffered no consequence. Another big thing is being slow to anger. I think a lot of times if you're in a disagreement with somebody, the default setting you should have is assume you were in the wrong. In everyday life, being slow to anger means taking the time to understand situations, consider different perspectives, and respond calmly rather than reacting emotionally. God is calling us to surrender the impulse to rush to anger. What would it be like if God had a short temper, a short fuse? What if he was quick to anger? It would be a big problem for us. He's asking us to do the same thing. Assess the situation as best you can before you react, and do it without emotion. Another thing we should consider is to speak cautiously, calculated about what you say. I like what James says. He says, "The tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness among our members. It defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of life, and it is set on fire by hell." Um, the power of words that cannot be taken back, do great damage or take, or of great advantage to people. And yes, we will be judged for every careless word that we speak. Be cautious with how we speak. I like this one. How great is a forest set ablaze by such a small fire? A small tongue can do such great harm. Talking about being cautious, for many, many years, I was asked in my profession and job to make phone calls to people that were late on payments. And the first thing I found out very quickly is if you didn't approach it kind of as a courtesy call, I'm calling to try to help, you could offend people very quickly. They would feel like you were calling into question their integrity. And so it was a huge, huge issue to be cautious. And so many times I would call and say, there must be something that we did. Your payment's showing late. Did you make the payment? And a lot of times I would find out, yeah, the teller or whoever had taken the mail that day and posted that check and put it into the wife's account, put it in the checking account, put it in the son or daughter's account because there wasn't a note, and they didn't see that it was a loan payment that was due. And so how bad would that have been if I would have made it personal? Said, "What kind of person are you? Doesn't make your payments every month." And then for them to say, "I did make the payment. You put it in the wrong place. Not good. So be very cautious, with the words that you use. So to sum up this thought, don't rush through life. Take the time to make thoughtful decisions. Be slow to judge others. Be slow to anger. Be cautious and slow to speak. Life is not a race. The more intentional you are with your choices, the more you're shaping your future in the best possible way.